One. All right. Welcome back to Collective Intelligence Block Party number 19 and to another edition of Vegans of Color. We're joined by my sister Jackie and my brother Melvin. Take it away, Jackie and Melvin.
Well, again, thank you for providing the space and the opportunity for us to gather and have these very delicate conversations. My brother Melvin and I were discussing yesterday really what we wanted to discuss this week, and we wanted to talk about white fragility. We think that it's time that we really start addressing that because it's pervading so much of our efforts and even our own community, within our own vegan community. And he recently, I think it was last week, sent me a video, or earlier this week sent me a video that was so impactful that we thought it would really be appropriate to start out the segment and really have a deep discussion and dive into the messages that are in this video. Melvin?
Yes.
Do you want to add anything before we watch the video?
No, the video is very powerful and it explains itself. It's really raw. It is grassroots. It is unedited. It is very passionate. And it is a story that only can be told by someone who is really experiencing the pain, the suffering of racism, of the historical consequences of racism. Someone who's really feeling it and knows in it and is living it.
So we're ready to watch that whenever you are, Jamin.
All right, screen sharing right now.
So I've been seeing a lot of things talking about people making commentary. Interestingly enough, the ones I've noticed that have been making the commentary are wealthy black people, making the commentary about we should not be rioting, we should not be looting, we should not be tearing up our own communities. And then there's been an argument of the other side of we should be hitting them in the pocket. We should be focusing on the blackout days where we don't spend money. But, you know, I feel like we should do both. And I feel like I support both. And I'll tell you why I support both. I support both because when you have a civil unrest like this, there are three types of people in the streets. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, and there are the looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, who really just want to shit up, and that's what they're going to do regardless. And then you have the looters. And the looters almost exclusively are just there to do that, to loot. Now, people are like, well, what did you gain? Well, what did you get from looting? I think that as long as we're focusing on the what, we're not focusing on the why, and that's my issue with that. As long as we're focusing on what they're doing, we're not focusing on why they're doing. And some people are like, well, those aren't people who are legitimately angry about what's happening. Those are people who just want to get stuff. Okay, well then, let's go with that. Let's say that's what it is. Let's ask ourselves why in this country in 2020, the financial gap between poor blacks and the rest of the world is at such a distance that people feel like their only hope and only opportunity to get some of the things that we flaunt and flash in front of them all the time is to walk through a broken glass window and get it. That they are so hopeless that getting that necklace, getting that TV, getting that change, getting that bed, getting that phone, whatever it is that they're gonna get, is that in that moment when the riots happen and if they present an opportunity of looting, that's their only opportunity to get it. We need to be questioning that why. Why are people that poor? Why are people that broke? Why are people that food insecure, that clothing insecure, that they feel like their only shot that they are shooting their shot by walking through a broken glass window to get what they need. And then people want to talk about, well, there's plenty of people who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and got it on their own. Why can't they do that? Let me explain to you something about economics in America. And I'm so glad that as a child, I got an opportunity to spend time at Push where they taught me this, is that we must never forget that economics was the reason that black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Do you understand that? That's what we came to do. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Now, if I right now decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money, I didn't allow you to have anything on the board, I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa, that was Rosewood. Those are places where we built black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So that's 450 years. So for 400 rounds of Monopoly, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. So then for 50 years, you finally get a little bit and you're allowed to play. And every time that they don't like the way that you're playing, or that you're catching up, or that you're doing something to be self-sufficient, they burn your game. They burn your cards. They burn your Monopoly money. And then finally at the release and the onset of that, they allow you to play and they say, okay, now you catch up. Now at this point, the only way you're going to catch up in the game is if the person shares the wealth, correct? But what if every time you share the wealth, then there's psychological warfare against you to say, oh, you're an equal opportunity hire. So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every time that I played, if you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa and like they did in Rosewood, how can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the f do I give a shit about burning the Football Hall of Fame, about burning the Target? You broke the contract when you killed us in the streets and didn't give up. You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own by our bootstraps in Tulsa and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract, so your Target, your Hall of Fame. As far as I'm concerned, they could burn this bitch to the ground. And it still wouldn't be enough. And they are lucky that what black people are looking for is equality and not revenge.
Ashe.
Ashe. Still moves me. I don't know how many times I've seen it.
That is a story that's coming from the bottom. That is a narrative that's coming from the bottom. And it's always been the stories coming from the bottom that has changed societies. Always the stories from the bottom. The people who are feeling the worst brunt of the oppression from the system, the worst brunt of the inequality, the worst brunt of the brutality. And I like the historical context that she put it in. You know, in her question asking why. Why? And I know for a lot of white people and also for a lot of, like she started out, well-to-do Black people, her narrative, her voice is frightening to them. And it's frightening because the very foundation that the wealthy, the well-to-do lives on is built upon the suffering, the inequality that poor people have to live with. And intuitively, we're going to get into this white fragility and white privilege. Intuitively, they know that it's wrong. It's wrong. But they will use people like Candace Owens in academia, tell stories that glosses over the truth, that hides the truth, that's very deceptive, that don't really get down to the truth, that do not tell a whole system truth, that does not tell a systemic truth. She was talking about systemic injustice that's been going on historically in our country. And I like her analogy of a monopoly because we all play monopoly, and that's a vicious, vicious game. And the bank is going to win. Bank is going to win, and you have to trample over it. You have to try to break your neighbor.
What do you think, Melvin? And we've had these conversations. What do you think is the threat? The historical context like you were talking about, that constantly wanting to reinvent history, forget that's amnesia that they want to propel forward and they want to maintain. What do you think it is that the culture, the society that exists is so fearful of when they see people of color, and that it's so threatening?
I think that it's two things: power and identity. I don't know where I read somewhere, I don't know if it was Marx or somebody said that power only concedes to a greater power or equal power. And when we look at historically, power has always been within a patriarchal, centralized model of power, of power and authority. And for the last few thousand years in history, you've had a lot of different kingdoms. And I'm going to go all the way back to the Egyptian societies, even prior to their Mesopotamia, and ancient Chinese societies in Syria. And those there were patriarchal, hierarchical power structures of separation, domination, and privilege. And fast forward now, that model has permeated our society and our culture now, to where those who have at the top of the hierarchical system, they don't want to give up their power. They don't want to give up the privilege. The other thing, I think that the benefits that come with the privilege, you know, that frightening to a lot of white people is losing their identity, is no longer being quote unquote white. Because the white gene is really recessive when you look at it. And when you mix different people together, different colors, white is gone. I think that's another deep, deep driving psychological insecurity of white people, probably particularly in America. I don't know about German whites or Swiss whites, Swiss over in Switzerland, you know, I don't know about there. But the American whites in particular, I think one of their fears is annihilation of quote unquote the white race. And we live in a culture, we live in not only a very racist culture, but a class-based culture. And in this class-based culture, you have privilege depending on the class you live in. Not only is it a class-based and a race-based culture, but it's a very ruthless, competitive culture, where the way you get ahead in this society and is glorified in sports, in education, in scientific achievement, and art, that you compete against somebody and you beat them. And you don't just beat them, you humiliate them, you smash them, and you take the prize. So we have this here culture that's been going on for thousands of years, where you have this mindset of separation, domination, and privilege. And now you mix in with this new phenomena of racism like we have that came along with American history, and then this class culture that we have, and this ruthless competition that we all have to put food on our table, to have a decent lifestyle. It's a very ruthless, competitive culture that we live in. And each level of class that a person is, certain privileges come with that class, certain benefits, access to opportunities, access to education, access to money, access to living a more fulfilling life, more fulfilling materialistic life comes with that. And when white people, a lot of white people don't believe that they have white privilege, because they have worked hard, they have really suffered a lot, they have struggled a lot. When you look at this history of American history, you see how the Irish came over here, you see how the Italians came over here, you see how the Germans came over here, you see how all the different white immigrant group came over here, and they had to struggle. They went to struggle to build what they have, to achieve what they've achieved now. But it's one thing that they didn't have to contend with during their historical struggle over here. If they were discriminated against, if they were left out, if they were hung, if they were denied access to, it was for religious, social, economics. Yeah, it was for religious, social, economic. It wasn't because of the color of their skin. They were not enslaved. And that is the big, big difference right there. There's another layer of trauma, a deeper layer of trauma that people of color have had to learn how to live, had to live with in this culture that white people haven't had to contend with. I was reading a little article I was telling Jackie about this here, a white man. He was saying that, wow, he said, I've lived with, and he, it's a word for, they call them trailer whites, or trailer, it's a demeaning term that they have for white people that's really, really poor. And I've seen these pictures, and I've read this story, how poor they live, you know, had diseases, no opportunity. He said, I didn't have any privilege. But then he read Peggy McIntosh's book, White Privilege, and he realized that he did have privilege. He did have access to things that people of color did not have access to merely because of the complexion of his skin. And it's difficult for white people to acknowledge that, because what comes with that, acknowledging that, is responsibility. It's responsibility. And if you acknowledge that you have privilege, what are you going to do with that? You're going to continue the status quo, or you're going to try to use your privilege to make the world a better place. You know, like Jamie couldn't help but be born the way he's born. He was born with privilege. But what he's doing with his privilege is total different. Salesh couldn't help that. He got privilege. But look what he's doing with it. You and I, Jack, we got a little bit more. But look what we're doing with it. You know, so it's not a bad thing that you have privilege. It's, do you want to continue that same legacy that your privilege has created in this country and in the world? Do you still want to live in that mindset of separation and domination? And that's one of the things when we look at white privilege. Another way they used to say it is white supremacy. It's called white supremacy. And this is something that really came into being big time during when Britain was in France, in Britain and Spain was taking over the world, in Belgium, because they were really taking over countries of color. When we look at World War I and World War II, these wars were about white countries, white men fighting about who's going to control different parts of the world. Who's going to control this part of Africa? Who's going to control that part of India? Who's going to control this part of the Americas over here? Who's going to control this part of China? That's what these wars were about. It wasn't about spreading democracy. We fighting because we want to have democracy. It was about establishing white supremacy in the world. That's what they were about. This mindset that you have the right, because of the complexion of your skin, to have dominion over earth and all life on earth. And this is where we are right now. Except for China, maybe Nigeria, we got maybe throw Venezuela in there. There's no countries of color that's destroying this earth like the major white countries are. That's destroying our environment. When we look at these here 9 planetary boundaries, the 9 planetary boundaries that science have identified that maintains the stability and the resiliency of the earth and all life on this earth for society to live on. These non-planetary boundaries, which is climate, the biosphere, integrity of biodiversity, species extinction, and also ecosystem collapse, ocean acidification, the stratosphere, where there's holes in the stratosphere, the stratosphere up there with the stratosphere is being damaged, aerosols that's in the air, that's polluting the air. And there's a couple more. When we look at these here boundaries, these 9 planetary boundaries, 4 of them have already been crossed, and 4 of them have already been crossed, and the other one almost stretched to the limit. The main countries that's doing these here are white countries, because they have this mindset of white supremacy. But they could go into any country in the world, do what in the hell they want to, and nobody had better say anything to them, destroying all the animals and taking all the natural resources from the earth, exploiting those just for profit. And now here we are right now, we got this pandemic, which is also part of the evolutionary growth of humans on this earth, this pandemic that we're looking at right now. And it all have come about because of this here. You know, we know that the pandemic came from this here humans eating animals, but what caused that? What caused that is globalism, pushing these poor people more and more into the forest, forcing them off the land, and pushing people into the forest and into the habitat where the animals live at. And the main driving forces of globalism today is white supremacy, until China came on. So this is this thing, and it's hard for white people to relate to what Beverly's story, and many black people, because they don't want to give up the power. They don't want to give up the identity. They don't want to give up the luxury. You know, they don't want to acknowledge that it's enough for all of us. It's enough on this earth for all of us to live well. They still want to have the privilege. And once again, one of the things that drive white people is afraid of annihilation. If everybody got together and didn't have an issue, you marry who you want with, you have sex with who you want to have sex with in a very short period of time, here in the United States, you wouldn't see many more white people if that happened. And that's a fear. And that shouldn't be a fear. That's the evolution. That's part of the healthy evolution of life. We talk about human, and we got to move away from a hope of time will come. I don't know if I will be able to see it, where we can acknowledge people, different complexion, but we don't make judgment about people because of how they look.
Melvin, what do you think about, and I've been having this conversation a lot this week, about looking up to the Black faces in high places for solutions, for them to take a stance, for them to rock the boat, for them to make an impact, and about us always looking up for those of us that have risen through the ranks and have broken through and have that privilege, that now they can do something. What do you think of that whole idea?
I think that it's part of, you know, I'm really into whole system health and healing, and also systems thinking. And just that model in itself is flawed, because we're looking for like a messiah. We're looking for some type of leader, somebody to do this for. When it's grassroots, it should help. It should start here. Those, and it's really unfair, and it's unrealistic to think that someone who's a millionaire, someone who's a billionaire, someone who have accomplished the material wealth that they have, the material comfort that they have, that they would give that up so that people on the street like Beverly or my daughters, even myself, can have more. You know, it's kind of fanciful to think that the Black bourgeois class or the Black millionaire class, like Magic Johnson and the other ones, what's the basketball player, these guys gonna give up their $1 billion to make the world a better place. Just like it's fanciful to think that what's this guy that on Amazon gonna give up his $1 billion to make the world a better place. It's fanciful. It's really a fantasy. And it's, you know, can they contribute something? I think they contribute. Jeff Bezos could contribute something. You know, they all can contribute something, but it has to be, you know, like what we was talking about doing with Feed Brooklyn. It has to be grassroots. It has to be grassroots. And those Blacks who quote unquote made it, they have to come down and talk to the Beverlys and listen to the Beverlys for guidance. If they can do that, I can see how they can be really helpful. But to stand there purchase and maintaining the status quo, they can't be really helpful. It's just like the new Green Deal. We get all on the board with the new Green Deal, what are we going to have? More of the same. As a matter of fact, it's going to be worse. It's going to be worse. One of the things that Beverly was talking about with the economics, she was saying, only way you're going to get it right is that you have to redistribute the wealth. And I don't think that the blacks who have made a lot of money, they can relate to that, because they are privileged now too. They are part of a very privileged status when you become a billionaire or multimillionaire or millionaire. You're in a privileged status, and do you want to give that up? I don't know if I would want to give it up if I had $1 billion. Right now I'm saying, yeah, if I had a whole lot of money, I wouldn't, just sit on it. But if I had a whole lot of money, I don't know. But right now I'm saying that. I'm just not saying that. So I don't want to judge them, but I think we have to be realistic. We have to create movements down here on the ground and processes and systems and do things that we can do. Like I've said here many times, the reason why I'm a vegan is because I realized how powerful the system is. With the media, the intelligentsia, the army, the military, the science, with the universities. But I know by going vegan, just by not eating animal food, that is one thing that we all can do to bring about this here rapid social regeneration, social and economic regeneration that we want so much. So I think that's one thing we could do. We definitely cannot rely upon the blacks who have made it, because they are part of the privileged class too. And I don't think they want to rock that boat. Neither do they want to change it. You look like Charles Barkley in what's that other basketball player?
Michael Jordan?
Yeah, no, the other real big guy, Shaq. Yeah, they got so many cars, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. $1 million cars. They're not about to give up their $1 million car so that a little black kid or a brown kid or a white kid can have some healthy food. They're not. They're not.
This brings up a really good conversation that we had when we were developing one of the programs that we're working on together, about how do we go back to our communities and help them understand our lifestyle, our choices, and that is not the aspiration. That the aspiration is to heal the whole. The aspiration is to become healed and go back and ripple that healing among ourselves, locked arms, and help one another, and not look to be that's the aspiration. And we talked a lot about that in our program, about the alternative to incarceration, about giving them something else to aspire to. And do you think that that's part of the reason why our message of veganism is so difficult to penetrate, because of the aspirations are not aligned with our core lifestyle, our core beliefs? Do you think that that's part of it?
Well, yes, but I also think it's deeply ingrained brainwashing about the meat culture, about identity, and also recognizing, change happened incrementally and very slowly. Now, something I read, and Silas always talk about this, I may be pronouncing this with exponential change. I've read somewhere that the conversion of black people to veganism is outpacing the conversion of whites to veganism. That wouldn't even been said 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So my point is that it's happening. It's happening over in the garden where I go over there. And what blows is so many black vegans and black vegan restaurants. And I want to say, and it's all been driven by women, mostly women are doing this stuff. is being driven by women. So it is happening, like in my own family, it's happening, but it's rough. Trying to bring my daughters and my grandchildren over to veganism. And it's just really rough. So one of the, when we're trying to change human behavior, we really have to be patient and try to build systems and processes to help people to change. Education is a big thing. Like until I learned about whole system health and healing, I had nothing to compare the status quo with. I had nothing to compare it to. Till I learned about system thinking, I had nothing to compare how to think. I had nothing to compare with analyzing something, and you just analyzing a part of the whole, and then you make a conclusion based on analyzing that part about the whole. Until I learned system thinking, I didn't have anything to compare with. So I think to answer your question, it's about education. Massive, massive education. And one of the first things you told me when I met you about your son, and you told me going to school, and you told me that, well, I'm not sending him to school so he could become an administrator for the system. You told me that about 2 or 3 years ago when we first met. He's not going to school to be an administrator for the system. So that's the thing right now. Most Black people, they want their kid to go to school to be administrator for the system. So how do we change that paradigm? How do we change that story? How do we do that? I think through education, seeds to inspire, giving a grassroots, door to door, neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, just out there telling a different story. And that's one of the things that Silesh says on his website. Well, what can we do? He said, one thing, tell different stories. We have to start telling these different stories to give people something to compare and contrast. Every time I mention to people about the codes for the healthy earth, just that first one, aspire to do no harm, align our thoughts, our words, and our action with that which is nourishing for the entire community of life. I don't get any pushback from anybody, but they never heard it. And I could see that look come in their eyes. I could look at their skin. I could look at their body and see that resonates strong. So we have to start telling these here stories, these other stories, building grassroots organizations. Like you and I, we was on the path of going into the churches. We was in the path of going into getting with the grassroots community-based organization. We were going to get in there and we were going to bring veganism to them. We was going to bring whole system health in here. Just what you and I were getting ready, we're talking about doing. And knowing that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and that any effort that we're making going in the right direction, that we are making an impact, even though it don't seem like it. I remember a long time ago, when I first started reading, I told this guy, I said, man, I'm reading the books and it don't seem like I'm learning anything. He said, that's when you are learning. So when we are, telling a different story, it may not seem like it's working, but it is working, because the mind, it worked differently to try to get people to incorporate new narrative, new story. But just the fact that they heard and they listened to it. And we just got to be relentless and keep telling that story with compassion and love. And that's another thing that I like about you, Jackie. You always talk about compassion. And that's the story that we have to start telling more in our communities about compassion. Because as I said earlier, we live in a very ruthless, competitive culture where the more ruthless and competitive you are, the more cold and callous you are, the more you seem like a all right person, the more you congratulated. You get pat on the back. If you can make a quick, decisive decision to hurt someone, you can make a quick, decisive decision to eliminate someone from, you are seen as, wow, they call it the ego strength. That's what they call it, ego strength. When you can make these decisions and don't even flinch to hurt somebody, ego strength. So we have to start telling different stories. in talking about compassion. You know, I know when I was a kid, I got to a certain point in my life that if you said something soft to me, I didn't want to hear that. It had to be, because I had become conditioned by this culture of normalized violence, that to express myself as a human being, that violence was the modality to do that, and people can hear me. I was conditioned to be there. I definitely wasn't born that way. I was conditioned to be that way from this culture, the cultural context that I was raised in, all the movies that we've seen about these guys killing up people, taking the Native American land and beating John Wayne, beating the snot out of somebody, and he was patted on the back and, you know, killing up the Indians and the cavalry and all of this here stuff, all these here gangster movies. I was conditioned, these were men that wow, that's how you be a man, is violent. So now we're talking about compassion to these teenagers. We got to understand that at first that's going to be scary to them. But we have to keep telling the story about being compassionate. Because on a one-on-one, that when you get these youngsters by themselves and you talk about compassion, it sinks in. So we have to be a grassroots organization. We have to go into the churches. We have to do what you and I have started out to doing, the grassroots organizations in the community that has credibility. You know, it's a lot of in the Black community, it's a lot of adults who used to be out there in the madness. Now they got families. They're not in the madness right now. Those are people that we need to get out and talk to and start telling about whole system health and healing, systems thinking, you know, and talking about compassion, showing them to an alternative, talk about, do you want your son to grow up? Yeah, it's great that he get an education, but do you want your son to be the one that's denying somebody their house loan? You want your son to be the banker that's screwing over people? That's what we're going to school to get your PhD for? The scientist is making the bomb? So, but also parallel to with that, showing them how you could take that education and make a contribution to the world and still make a living. And this hard work, and it's grinding work, and it's work that don't seem like is producing any good outcome. That's where the vision and the faith comes in.
Let me ask you something, because we talked about this also, about the mental health. And I read somewhere that it's in two different areas, where if you want to judge the health of a society, you look for the children. You can gauge the health of a society by looking at the children. And another one was look at the prison system. And that also tells you about the health of a society. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how that idea of pick yourself up by your bootstraps and just, you know, now the opportunity is there, work hard, about the trauma, that lived collective trauma, that ancestral trauma that is within us, that we carry forward, and how that affects our mental health, and then how we're treated, how mental health is treated, how we see mental health, especially from communities and cultures that have experienced centuries of trauma. How do you explain that pick yourself up by your bootstraps, where that's where you have to work with?
Well, let me say further, I worked in the mental health system for a long time. And it is an unhealthy, ruthless system. And it's based upon the DSM diagnosis, which is a very racist medical model is a very racist, reductionist medical model of blaming human beings for their behavior. It does not look at human behavior from it does not look at the economic impact and culture. Well, they talk about, they now got in some cultural diversity in there, but that's just for be political. But they don't look at the economic impact and the cultural variables that influence behaviors and personality at all. This thing about pull yourself up by the bootstraps is, again, part of this here mindset of separation and domination that I did it myself. This Ayn Rand individualism thing that I did it myself, and nobody else helped me. See, that's one of the biggest delusions and misconceptions and brainwashings ever put down. One of the things that I learned from Will Tuttle, he asked this question: what is responsible? What was required for the food to get on your plate? When you look at people like Jeff Bezos, well, people look at him as this rugged individual. He did it for himself. He pulled himself up out of it. He went to school. He did all that stuff. But what was required for Jeff Bezos to get to where he's at? Before Jeff Bezos came along with people like Jamin and Shailesh, they laid the foundation. Okay, they laid the foundation. That system that he used, that technology, he couldn't have done it. Now, my point is this here: there were thousands of people that was required for Jeff Bezos to be. Now, just looking at the technological part, we got to look at the human labor. What was required? What was required? When you look at the human, it's ugly. When you peel that onion back, that these people in all these poor countries are being exploited to make these here products to sell over here. So this thing about pull yourself up by the bootstrap is a very reductionist and technocratic point of view that's very egotistical, that nobody just pulled themselves up by the bootstrap. Along the way, somebody, there's social and economic and cultural factors that's coming into being, that's making it possible for you to do it. Now, if there's some moments where it may appear that you did it by yourself, but you didn't. It was someone always by there. And one of the things, Martin Luther King said when he's this thing of pull people by the boot, you don't have a bootstrap. And like the Sister Beverly was saying, when you are at such a big economic disadvantage, when you look at white privilege, now that's a bootstrap. When you look at white privilege and you look at the historical context in which that came about and how that came into being, and you tell somebody to pull himself by the bootstrap, when you look at right at the end of, the police system that we have, that we see today, came into being the slave patrols in 1705, something like that, to round up Africans who were trying to free themselves. And then what we have now are this whole criminal justice system and how the police system morphed, came into being at the end of the Civil War to re-enslave Black people. And during the same time, we're talking about a systemic, countrywide, nationwide thing where Black people were held in another form of slavery. And there were Black codes and all other type of law that was put up that strictly prohibited Blacks from even moving in certain areas or owning anything. But during this same historical time, all the Germans came over here, they got free land. All the Italians came over here, they got free land. The Irish, everybody came over here. Go out west. Go to California. Go to Colorado. Go to Nevada. It's free. Go over there, get it. Get it. It's yours. No. We'll give you a grant. We give you some money. No better. We'll send somebody over to kill up the Indians. We'll kill up the Indians and we'll kill all the animals up there so you can have this. So fast forward, who got a bootstrap? Now then you tell the people who for over 200 years, if you even move out of a certain vicinity, you were lynched. Either you went to prison or you got your shit beat out or you got raped. If you didn't, the only job you could get was going to some white person house, cleaning up the crap and you couldn't get any other job for 200 years. And they're gonna tell me, pull yourself by the bootstrap. Where's the bootstrap? So this thing is a myth, it's a fable, and it's a fable to make the capitalists feel good. And it's not only ignorant people, both black and white, feel good that I did it by myself. It was a very unfair system. That's what you did it in. Yes.
Amen, Melvin. And it's a system that's set up to make people of color fail.
Absolutely.
And I have witnessed that over and over again with my Native American friends. I have witnessed terrible things that are, hard to believe until you witness it. The health care for Native Americans, I don't know if it's the same elsewhere for other people of color. For example, dental, they go in to get their teeth, fillings or whatever. They pull their teeth out. And this is an intentional act.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have your teeth, well, we know, right? You don't digest your food, you get all kinds of sickness. They've set up on this coast, I don't know about other parts of this US, I'm trying to remember what they're called, like See Alaska is one of the groups. Well, anyway, they have their shareholders, right? So what by making them shareholders of their land where they get, paid out money, which they don't like money. They don't want money. It's not part of their heritage, not part of the system they live by. It's actually divided them. So, and if you're half white and half Native, you can't be a shareholder. So where do you go, right? And so the system has created failure for the majority of people, including women. And I just want to also voice for women because, I am white privilege. I talk about it openly. I am grateful that I've had an education, but I've come from school of hard knocks too. But I'm still white privilege. And I use my voice and my work and my life to advocate for all downtrodden people. And so I just wanted to say that because I think it's really important for white people like myself to be advocates for people of color, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's First Nations, because we have to change this system. The school to prison pipeline exists, guys. There isn't equal rights. There is not equity in this country. It is not really a democracy. Thanks.
I'm glad you mentioned the word democracy. And that's the code word, how they get us. They say it's the democratic process. It's the democracy. You wouldn't have voted for this. And that's one of the charades and facades that's been played on us forever. This is a thing of democracy. And it has so many flaws and myths about democracy. It's just a system of deception where you have people playing played against one another. And we know, and everybody know, that is the ruling class is the financial elite who controls the politician. But we are willing to accept that. We are willing to accept it. That is the financial elite who controls the politician.
I'd like to say we were willing because I think things are a-changing now. We ain't willing no more.
Well, let me say, a lot of us is not willing.
Yeah.
You get a lot of people, they still stuck, and you look like, I'm gonna give you a good one, is Joe Biden. And most of those people are supporting Joe Biden. They really believe that this democratic process is gonna bring about him. We had brother Obama up there for 8 years, and he was a damn good administrator. He was the best administrator. I don't think there's ever been a better administrator for the system than Obama. He didn't cause any problems. He cleared things up internationally. Everybody loved America again. He saved the country when he was about to about to implode financially because he bailed out. He gave all billions of dollars to the financial elite. You know, he did nothing controversial. He did nothing. He's had Wall Street in love with him. Everybody. I mean, he was a great administrator. But there was no regeneration. There was no structural change. You know, it was nothing. The system remained intact and floated on. And then Donald Trump came, and Trump is riding in on the accomplishment of Obama to keep the system going. You know, he's riding in on that, and he's taking credit for that. Obama was a great administrator. So one of the greatest hopes that's played on us is this here thing of democracy, which is rooted in the mindset of separation and domination and privilege. And anytime you have separation, well, it's just a leadership structure. It's a hierarchical, centralized model of leadership. And anytime you have a hierarchical, centralized model of leadership, I don't care where it's at, here in the United States, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, it lends itself to abuse and deception and cheating. That's just the nature of these hierarchical, centralized models of leadership. And when you look at this here thing, we live in a class-based society where everybody want to be quote unquote middle class or above. I mean, you get there through ruthless competition. We were talking about the behavior health system. I've worked in that place, in that system, and I really have a bad taste in my mouth of that system because of my experiences in there with racism, experiencing racism, and also how the clients who were in the system, you know, all the behavior health organizations have these here highfalutin mission statements and values of loving the client, serving the client, we care for the client, we believe in the client, right? All blah, blah, blah. But all of the administrators at the top, say like the behavior health system get $2 billion. The administrators out of that $2 billion, they get probably 1.2 billion of it. And then you share it, and then you have to do services with the remainder of it. And every service that you give, if that service do not fit into the DSM Diagnostic Administrative Code, you don't give the service. As a matter of fact, if that client don't have access insurance, he can come up there, I don't care how bad he's suffering. You don't give him a service. He don't get a service if it don't fit the diagnostic code. Now, what the diagnostic code does is it victimize the victim. It says that you are depressed. And then if you as a client, if you don't go along with the diagnosis of depression or schizophrenia, whatever, they got something else for you. What they can do, they get their psychiatrist to say that you are a dangerous self, a threat to others, and they can do things to you. They can petition you. If they don't even petition you, they got other things they can do to you, petition you. Your housing, your other thing is tied to you taking this psychotropic medication. And I've heard these clients pleading that I don't want this medication. It's making me worse. And they would force these men to take these medications. I was in a very, golly, I'm so happy to be out of that system. I am so happy to be out of that system, not oppressing people anymore. And in that system, if you don't go along with the oppression and believe in those diagnoses, you cannot make it in that system. You have to believe in those diagnoses.
So what happens, Melvin? So what happens to members of our community that have so much depression and anxiety, because these are adaptations to our environment? Right? This is a consequence of our environment and the system. So what happens to us when we can't turn to the mental health component of, you know, our health system to find relief?
Well, what's happening is that, and this phenomena has been growing since the 70s, is that you find people with quote unquote mental health issues, they put them in prison. That's the prison. I think 80% of the prison population is people there who really have quote unquote mental health disorders. Now, these things that we call mental health disorders is really social oppression. It's really oppression. People suffering economic difficulties and they don't know how to handle it. Now, what happened to people of color is that people of color suffer another layer of trauma and victimization because they don't want to acknowledge that racism is a factor that's oppressing people of color. And racism is also a factor that's making it difficult for them to get housing. Now, I worked in the behavioral system, health system. I saw how some property owners who got vouchers to let people live there, they would get Section 8 vouchers. They were more likely to let a white person who was quote unquote mentally ill and had a substance abuse problem move into the complex versus a person of color. But they wouldn't say it that way. And clinicians, they don't want to acknowledge, neither do the DSM talk about the impact of racism on people's life or in the behavioral health system. You know, that just like on a jury, it's just the same as a jury. Jury have their biases. Clinicians have their biases. Administrators have their biases. We are a racist country. What's her name? This white lady. She's been out advocating against racism for a long time. She's very old, Madeline. She said every white person in America is a racist. She said you can't get away from it. She said if you deny you one, she gave some reasons. She said, but you're just a racist. She said, but you can change. You can address that. You can fight it. You can acknowledge it and not be a part of it. You can educate yourself. So my point is that the behavioral health system is overwhelmingly, it is a patriarchal, hierarchical model that's dominated principally by males and some females up there. And they're racist, very racist. And then the middle level management are mostly white and very racist. And then you go on down to the staff. I wouldn't say a lot of the staff that's working, from my experience, in the trenches, they're white, they're not hardcore racist. They may have some racist bias, but they're not hardcore racist. I've seen this, that's been my experience. Not to say they're not racist, but they're not hardcore racist. You know what I mean? They're not, if they're conscious of their bias, they'll check themselves up. The ones that I met, the whites that I met, that's in the trenches. But when you get into the level like middle management and all up, those they're hardcore racists. And they're very privileged people. But they won't acknowledge their racism. They're clothed all behind diagnostic language. They're clothed all, they're hide behind policies and procedures. When I've seen it over and over how they would treat one client differently who was showing symptoms based on color or either social economic status versus another one. Now, there were clients who were in our program who were like, they were connected. Like they could get on the phone and maybe call the governor or the governor's assistant or the director of the program. Let me tell you, I could be on one end of the town, clearly, literally, in West Phoenix, 75th Avenue and Thunderbird. And if those people call, I had to drop whatever I had to do and go over there and see this here white client who was connected to come to do whatever I could do so that they wouldn't holler and scream. If that was the same homeless person, they wouldn't have done that. So the built-in biasness is in there in the system like that. And I'm so glad I'm out of that system. I'm not part of that there. had my personal struggles in there. It really has left a bitter taste in my mouth of the behavioral health system and how ruthless the racism is. Like, because I had a degree and I was licensed, I was a threat to a lot of whites who was not licensed or who was licensed and didn't have the degree, and they knew I want to move up. And let me tell you, it's ruthless. It's ruthless. If you don't have someone up there in upper management who say, hey, he's okay, and I mean he's okay, they'll get you. They'll get you if you're a person of color. They will get you if you let you be a bootlicker. A bootlicker. If you're a bootlicker, you might be able to survive. But if you don't believe in a narrative like the DSM, and if you talk about racism and you talk about colonialism, oh my goodness. If you're in a staffing and you mention racism or you mention historical colonialism, oh my goodness, because it's not in the DSM. And because what you're doing, you're hitting on this thing of white privilege.
And I'm glad you brought that up because, again, so much of our work and so much of our collaboration is about these topics. Can you speak about not speaking of racism, not speaking of colonialism and the impact and how addiction then plays a role in this, especially from our community members who are then released from prison and the recidivism, addiction? That's really like your expertise. And then we've had really deep conversations about that, about recidivism, about addiction, about not discussing how racism plays a role. And could you help us understand, especially with people of color in these communities where addiction and not addressing racism, how they're interlinked?
Well, they are interconnected. You know, this is the thing is that, first of all, most crimes that are being committed are economic crimes. Just like Kimberly said, why? Why is this guy going out committing a petty crime and going to prison? Why, when you look at his record, it's just petty crime after petty crime after petty crime? Why? These are economic crimes. These are crimes that, when you look at our prison system and you see that Black people make up, what, 10% of the population in the United States or 12% of the population, but then here in Arizona, we suffer like 34% of the prison population nationwide, something like 25% of the prison population, and most of the people in the crime is economic crime, even as for drugs, they were out. They were out trying to get money, not support habit, but to live on, to live on. And the drugs have permeated the community for a reason. It's not that the drug just flowed into the community on their own. They're there as a mechanism of control. And poor people are using drugs as a way of self medication, you know, from a harsh reality. Like the sister was saying, you want a gold chain, you want a cell phone. The only way you could get it is smashed through a glass. That is a layer of trauma, a psychological trauma that people live with. And we have to understand that economic is the foundation of economics is racism, because that is a way the system uses to make money to exploit people along racial lines. If you're going to have an economy where you have a sector of the people who are down here working for minimum wage or less than minimum or for minimum wage, and then you have people working for a little bit above minimum wage, those people who are working for minimum wage can never get out of their rut. They can never earn enough money to live a comfortable and decent life and to have normal things. So they have nothing to pass on to their children. Nothing to pass on to their children. Let me say one more thing. And we live in a society of consumerism, a very materialistic society of consumers. What drives this economy is consumerism. What help people identities are so attached to consumption. We live in a society of consumption. So you find these poor people, they are inundated with this here brainwashing of consumerism, consumption, and they don't have any money to get there. So they resort to crime. And where do they learn this here crime from? They learn it from the politician. Every 10-year-old kid, 12-year-old kid know the politicians and cops are crooked. Where did they learn that from? They didn't learn it in a textbook. They see the reality of the politicians and cops and religious leaders. All these people crooked. They learn it from this here culture. So they get to a certain age where they want to have nice things, and they don't. Their parents didn't have the what we call it, the historical wealth, the wealth to pass on to them, because there was no home ownership, there was no money savings in the bank to pass on to their children. So these children, these young people, both black and white, they want to have nice things, and they see that one pathway to that is criminality, and then the involvement in drugs. And drugs, all drugs, even cannabis, is very addictive to people, and it does change behavior. What I mean by cannabis is psychologically addictive to some people, and they don't think that they can live without. They really don't think they can live without their cannabis. That's an addiction when you don't think that you can breathe, you don't think you can work, you don't think you can function, you don't think you can do without it. That's addiction. And then when you get into the other drugs like methamphetamine and cocaine and heroin, the addictive potentials of those are even greater, and also the damage that it does to the brain, how it takes over the central, how it hijacks the brain, the part of the brain for a higher learning, from the decision process. One of the things, when the brain hijacks the brain, the only part of the working is the limbic system. The fight or flight part is working then. Once the drugs hijack the brain and takes over the higher cognitive function of the brain, it's the limbic system. So you find these young black kids, youth, and I'm going to say, I like to say all youth, because I think it's important in our story. We have to start telling stories about poor whites too. It's very important that we mention poor whites, because they're part of this here thing too. They've been victimized by the system of democracy too. You know, and we have to, talk about poor white men. And one of the things about, we're not hearing about the white men that the cops killed, innocent white men. There's one right here in Mesa a couple years ago. This man was down on his knees, pleading for the cop, please don't kill me. This cop still killed this. You seen that? About 2 years ago. This man's on his knee, please don't kill me. And this cop killed this man, a white man. His girlfriend was there, please don't shoot. The man, and killed him. You think the cop's still on the force? So we need to tell a story that cops are killing white people too. So we can tell the whole story. So we can tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So we can make everybody feel inclusive, and we can make, when we talk about poverty, we have to talk about the poverty that poor whites experience, but we also have to layer that over, but you still are privileged in this society. And what you're gonna do with your privilege in this society? Are you just gonna, that you could go for an interview and you don't have to be defensive about anything. You just clean yourself up and go in that interview, and you're not worried about, is he going to judge me? You might be worried about diction a little bit. If you have a hillbilly sound, you might be worried about that a little bit, but you're not worried about much else. So I think in our story, we have to start making the injustices that poor white suffer part of the narrative, so that everybody will feel inclusive. And that's how we build solidarity and make our movement, what we want to do, more powerful by making it more inclusive. Drugs are a part of this here culture. It's a part of the fabric of the culture. And that's not coincidental. When you look at the DEA, this organization came into being, I think, was it in the 40s or something, in the 30s or the 50s. They're the ones who are responsible for all the drug policies. And these drug policies are just They call them war on drugs. War on drugs. And these policies, they fund these here agencies. So it's the DEA, organizations like that, just like the USDA and FAA and the FDA, they're supposed to be there protecting our food. The DEA is supposed to be there protecting us from drugs. They're part of the problem. That's why the drugs are in the community, because of the DEA. Because of them, those agencies like that. You know, so when you look at, and then you look at how drugs have been racialized, where, you know, black men get disproportionate sentences for the same drug and for even small amounts of drugs. So we see how racism is endemic in the criminal justice system in sentencing laws, you know, the racial disparities and how people are sent in way people are sentenced for the identical same crime, for the identical same drugs, or even having a whole lot of cocaine. And this guy got, I had a friend, I kid you not, they gave this man 20 years from having some residue in a pipe. Some residue. 20 years.
It's ridiculous. You know, I want to ask you about that. I want to ask you about what you said before, but I want to let Melissa say what she wanted to say, because I want to go back to what you were just saying about the inclusiveness.
Thanks, Jackie and Melvin. I'm really listening deeply to what you're saying. And we are living in a patriarchal, or have been under the suppression of the patriarchy, and mainly white patriarchy colonization. And women have suffered a lot. I've had a lot of, when I was in England, a lot of really negative experiences because I was a woman. And you're right, because I'm white and privileged, right? But still, as a woman, I have suffered great injustices, and I still do. And a woman of a certain age, as you get older as a woman, regardless of your color, there's a lot of misogyny and a lot of prejudice against women who are over 40 years old. Like, it's really hard to get work, you know? Anyway, so I didn't want to sidetrack on that. I wanted to just jump back to what you were talking about.
I think your story is part of the story, and it needs, we really need to tell that story to be really inclusive.
Yeah,
it's part of the story that women deal with some discriminations that men, you know, even though you are a white woman, you're dealing with a deep layer of discrimination, of oppression, of denial of your humanity that men can't even imagine. And this don't have nothing to do with color. It's gender.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention, under the patriarchal system, there is not reverence for life, reverence for birth. So, for example, when I got pregnant, I used to be an architect. They fired me. They didn't fire me. What they said was, well, now that you're pregnant, you can do the cataloging in the library. So it was like demoting me. And I said to them, F you, and I quit. But, you know, that is, you know, not okay, right? And so the system, it's not reverential. We don't have equity. You know, if we had reverence for life, we would honor all, right? Regardless of color, age, gender, etc., background. We'd honor the gifts that everyone brings. And before I'm sorry, Melvin, I won't take up a lot of airspace, and Jackie, I just wanted to also mention, because you were talking about, you know, the communities and the actual physical situations that people find themselves in. And I'm just remembering while you were saying that, Jamin and I were visiting relatives in DC, and we drove through Baltimore, and somebody said to us, don't go down, I forget what street it is, but of course that's the street we went down, right? I wept the whole drive. It was like a burnt out neighborhood. It was so hot. every other house was boarded up and people were sitting out on the stoops. They were not just people of color, I have to say. There were poor whites there, but the majority were not white. And it's just like, it's hopeless. Like, how the hell do you get out of there, right? And then on the flight back to Seattle, no, yeah, I think it was, I met a woman with her little girl, and we had to stop. I think we went to LA and then came here. I can't quite remember, but she was leaving with her daughter. She said, we're from Baltimore. We're getting the hell out of here because I know if I stay here, my daughter will never get out of this neighborhood. She will never have a chance to get an education and have a life. And so she was going to San Diego, I believe, to stay with family who are in the military. And, you know, I get that. It's like, so how can we change the system? How can we create an equitable system where not only everyone has an opportunity, but that we start living in this new way that we've all been talking about, right? Taking care of the earth, eating healthily, healthy food that's plant-based, honoring life, birth, taking care of women, taking care of elders, educating children, but not just educating them in this old system of education. We have to have a new system of education, right? Everything has to change.
Thank you, Melissa. And I think that that's a beautiful transition into like the conversations we've had about why we believe so much in our lifestyle and our choices and the impact that it can have, about what we're creating, you know, in the Vegan World 2026 Collective Intelligence Community. What we're doing here is about what are the solutions? How do we come together? How do we stop looking at the blame and pointing fingers and say, but now that we know, what do we do? How do we do better? And how do we bring, which leads me back to what you were saying, Melvin, about extending our circle of compassion to include poor whites, right? We're building allyship. We're bridging, right, these distances between us and helping us all understand that we're all fighting the same fight. But we also face this kind of unconsciousness when we talk about extending the circle of compassion to animals and the planet, when people are so downtrodden, are so beaten down, are so oppressed. How do you speak to communities that code like us to say, let's extend our circle of compassion to poor whites, now to the animals, then to the planet, to the ocean? How do we do that when they're in survival mode? Like what you said, they're in fight, flight, or freeze, which the system perpetuates and maintains that in place to keep us oppressed. It keeps us in constant survival mode so that we can't access all of our potential, all of our brain potential, right? Because all of our experience goes first through our most primitive brain, and our executive functioning is our last. So this is in service to our primitive brain. So all our experiences from our senses get processed in this direction. So if everything that we see, hear, experience goes through our primitive brain, and that's in survival mode, all our behaviors, our communications, and our choices are going to come from that. How do we then reach people's higher selves? How do we speak the language of love and compassion and help them to understand that there is another way, and our lifestyle choices do have the ability and the power to co-create this world of normalized nonviolence? How do we help them extend that circle of compassion to see that this is a benefit for you, to extend that circle of compassion and benefits the whole? You're muted, Melvin.
You know, that's what collective intelligence is about. That's what we're doing here. And it is a monumental task. And I know that right now, as we are talking, all across the United States and all over the world, there are people like us doing the same thing. But how do you get down into the trenches for people who are in survival mode, who their electricity going to be cut off? They really don't have any food. The kids don't have anything. The car broke down. They can't go to work. They're getting beat up by the boyfriend or the husband. You know, they're facing homelessness. There's truly not enough food. You don't have, you know, from week to week, you know, you're not going to have enough money to pay the bills, to get by. How do you reach those people about veganism and the benefits of veganism? Wow. I think nature's is going to take care of all of that.
I was just going to say that because these are the most vulnerable. These are the ones that are most vulnerable to be the first climate refugees, and the children of our communities
you
are
know,
the ones that are going to suffer the most. And that's imminent. There's an urgency. We know this. It's very imminent that this is going to happen.
It's, you know, my daughter read this book. I'm so proud of her. You met her, Michaela. It's called Radical Compassion, Radical Forgiveness. And she said the author pointed out to her at the end of the book. You remember when they had that tsunami in 2004? That only animals died are the house animals. No wild animals died because they knew the tsunami was coming days before, and they went to the highland. That's true. They went to the highland. And he was saying that about love and forgiveness, that's the only thing that's going to save us. And he said, unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of pain and suffering for us to get there. And I see that happening with what we're looking at, overstepping these 9 planetary boundaries with climate change. It's going to happen if we don't stop it in a short time. And out of that ruins, something new will come. I look at it as part of the evolution of humanity. The evolution of humanity started about 100,000 years ago with humans coming up out of Africa, spreading all over the world. Now we're here doing Zoom. This is part of the evolution of humanity. This is part of the evolution of humanity. Whether we want to accept it or not, you know, this African slave trade, the slavery here in the US, what China's history of dynasties where they was killing up people over there, the Egyptian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, Greece, Rome, all those are part of the evolution of humanity. We truly live this part of evolution of humanity. We know we're in a globally connected world. Before we could be over here in the United States and a bomb fall over there, people start, we didn't even know it. Now, someone gets sick on a part of the world, we're feeling it. We're feeling it. People hungry on the other part of the world, we're feeling it. People have food insecurity in the part of the world, we're feeling it. In answer to your question, Jackie, there are a lot of individual efforts are trying to make this world a better place and trying to address the destitution and the poverty and the desperation that just millions of people on this earth are struggling with. It may sound bleak, but unless we pull off what we want to do for 2026, we're going to reach that tipping point where we're going to experience cataclysmic, irreversible climate changes in the migration of the birds, changes in the seasons. All this stuff will radically impact life on this earth. And the suffering that we see now is we don't even see it now. You know, when we see the suffering in Africa, in Aleppo, that's minor compared to what we're going to see. But we still have to put forth our best foot forward to try to stop this, try to stop what's inevitable. You know, I heard the USDA proudly said we killed over 100 million, we killed over 1 million wild animals last year. Proudly. You know why? And then they said why? Cattle. Wild animals. Them fools, no, that's to our demise. bringing us to our demise. And this is all nature. This is nature doing what it has to do, what it's going to do naturally to reestablish its homeostasis. You know, nature is a self-organizing, regulating system that has no central leadership. It don't have a central leadership. And this, what we're looking at, climate change, is part of this nature's self-organizing and self-regulating system. That's what it is. It's a very natural, normal consequence of how we have exploited and plundered this earth and the resources. And we feel the urgency. We know it. You have children, you know, I have grandchildren, and we know it's real. So how do you reach those people? I think we just got to keep doing what we're doing now. Like you and I were going into the hood. We were going into the hood. We were going to the churches, you know, and educate on veganism and educate, you know, parents about, you know, do we want our children to grow up to be the administrators of the system? You know, if they get an engineering degree or accounting degree, what do you want them to do with that? You want them to be the banker? You want them to the ones screwing people out of their money?
So let me ask you, now we brought that up, what do you think about our plan of really addressing all of these oppressions by simply feeding everyone, simply bringing health through food, immune boosting, vitality supporting food, free food, and to me, reestablishing dignity by providing someone their own human right without judgment, a human right to health and food, and to be able to feed their families and their loved ones. What do you think about that as our mission?
I think that's awesome, and I think that's part of the whole of something that's necessary for educating people, or giving people vitalizing food, or letting people know that there's an alternative. You know, like I was explaining to my daughter and a friend, the reason why the system, the power that be the FDA and Fauci and all those people of the CDC, they don't want to acknowledge that these pandemics are really coming from animal food. They don't want to straight out and say it, because food is the biggest part of the economy. There's no part of the economy that's bigger than food, and everything. Food is the linchpin to the economy. And what's that? Animal food says food. So if you start feeding people healthy food, that's really addressing the problem. You know, and that's giving people hope. You know, when people have food in their belly, all revolutions start because people are hungry. People don't know that. They start because people are hungry. And that's to get the shit started. People want to eat. Every species want to eat. Crocodiles want to eat. Eagles want to eat. Grasshoppers want to eat. Ants want to eat. Humans want to eat. If people cannot eat, you're going to have some problems on your hands. And if you can give people food, healthy, vitalizing food, you're going to make some friends. And you can help educate people. So you know, what we're trying to do, that's one of the many efforts that's going on, like other people doing, like what the community gardens. People open up vegan restaurants, you know, and people starting their alternative schools, educate. These are all part of the whole that we're doing individually, that people are doing, that's pulling us together, and might give us some time, might give us some hope. But the thing is, we don't stop global warming, if we don't stop the acidification of the ocean, if we don't stop the depletion of the ozone, if we don't stop these phosphorus and nitrates going into the land and the ocean, and if we don't stop the aerosols going into the atmosphere, we have to stop all of this stuff. We can't just stop one. All of it have to end, or we're gone.
What about all the melting of the ice? That's very imminent. All the melting of the ice that will change life on this entire planet. And we're talking months. I mean, our deadline is right here. How do we help everyone see that your survival needs to refocus on not about rent and about a car payment, but literally in months, there may not be enough food if we don't all address and put all of our awareness where it needs to go, which is our imminent demise as a whole. Where racism and speciesism and classism, ageism, sexism is not going to matter, because we're all going to be in the same situation where those that are the powers that be, those that have the money are going to fly away to Mars in their spaceships or go in their bunkers and leave us, right? To, I guess, die away. And then when they come out, then the earth will revitalize, so there'll be less of us. I mean, to me, that's the prevailing idea, because that's what evidence shows me. They don't have to say it. Obviously, the system is in place and that's what it's doing. So how do we help them see that we love you so much that this is why we're talking and what we're doing? And I was thinking that maybe the efforts that we made that were kind of put on pause because of the health crisis, then maybe we need to start thinking of another avenue to get to. Maybe we need to bring them to Zoom. Maybe we need to invite them here. These community members that we were going to meet with, maybe we need to have them come to the Collective Intelligence and have these meetings and have these difficult, delicate conversations. Here, because if we can have this dialogue in this open forum, we can also present an example for other communities to see how we engage and how these conversations happen. Because I feel that the urgency is there, and I feel that we just cannot not do it.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head, Jackie. We're going to bring them, because there it is. We could bring them here. And Jamin put say, amen.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I would love it if Beverly were to join this program. Whether she's vegan or not, I mean, just, I think this is just a great space for her. I would just love it if she would join. So,
yeah.
We played a video earlier, sweetheart, where it was a woman, just a Black woman, just really laying it on the table. And it was just like, wow. I mean, it's so moving.
It was raw. It was raw. Yeah. Uncut, raw, passionate. So I'm gonna have to go pick up my grandson at probably in another 10 minutes from his martial arts class.
Yeah, I think we have like another 10 minutes in us. I wanted to share something with the group that really hit me in my heart. We were helping feed, in the city of Tempe, there were 400 families that reached out for support, for food support. So we went and we were distributing food, and food was purchased, rice and beans, and we were separating it. And after 3 or 4 of us working 3.5 hours, we only managed to create a pound of rice and a pound of beans for each family, and only 200 families. All that work, and we've provided one meal to 200 families when there's 400 families that are starving. And I just left so heavy with that. It was just so hurtful. Like, what can we do? And it made me think about all our efforts and all our planning here with Food Healers and Operation Stone Soup. So I was having a conversation with one of the women that's in charge, and we were talking about what we do and how we bring the vegan message. And I said, we would love to collaborate and come into the community and bring speakers and free food samples and just talk. She started telling me about what a relief the food that we're bringing is, because the food that the government provides and what was on the list, what we said we refuse, was Spam, like Vienna sausages, see the Spam. That's the look I got on my face. And I said, this is what they're requesting, because this is what the government provides for them. And this is what they're lacking. And it just made me absolutely cringe. And so we started talking about the health consequences of eating like this. And she said, well, when they're in survival, they eat that's all that they have. But at least they have free healthcare. And that's where the conversation got interesting. So I said, oh, they have free healthcare. And she goes, oh yeah, everything on the reservation, you all have free healthcare. But she goes, you know what? It really is just like you just go in there and you just get a bunch of medicines. Everybody just goes and they just get medicines. So we had a very interesting conversation about that cycle. about the food that's provided to our indigenous communities and how they become sick on these foods. And then here's the free healthcare with all the pharmaceuticals that just get pumped in, and who's buying those? It's all one system, and how they are literally being factory farmed, they're being guinea pigs. And these are our precious wisdom keepers, our wisdom carriers that are being the most, to me, assaulted. And I just left so heavy with that I had to write a post about it. And I said, today I used my privilege that my brothers and sisters on the reservations have not only the right to what I have more of a right. And how they're being used and how they're being neglected and how they're just being abused and assaulted by our system. We think it's affecting us. We're blind to what's going on there. We are completely blind to what's going on who are our indigenous brothers and sisters. And
Jackie, I don't want to interrupt you, but it is a genocide. Let's call it what it is.
Yes,
It is
absolutely.
not just unfair, honey. It is genocide. This bullshit, excuse my language, free health service for Native. These are the guys pulling Native teeth out. It's rubbish. It doesn't work. It's not healthcare. It doesn't honor who they are. It doesn't honor their traditions. They know how to take care of themselves. They just need to get out of the white man's system. They don't need the money, the white man's money. They don't need white man culture. They know how to live on this land. We need to turn to them to learn how to live on this land.
Exactly.
And how to honor Mother Earth and how to live holistically. Sorry, I'm very passionate about this.
Oh, no. Oh, I know. And I love when you explain.
It was perfect for you to put the narrative of genocide out there. That's what it is, genocide.
Yep, that's what it
And
is.
that's the story we have to tell, genocide.
Yeah.
And what hurt me was then when I offered to come in and bring our services and our contributions. And again, this is not judgment. This is just, again, the stories that they adopted and they've adopted and then they carry forward. She said, I don't know how many people will respond. They're very lazy and they don't want to change. And this is an indigenous woman who's helping and being of service to her indigenous community. So I know that there was no malice in her statement. It truly is what she believes with, what she knows. Mm-hmm. And I was just so taken aback. Oh, cute.
Hi.
I was just so taken aback by that, because that's even an amnesia for within the community themselves, that they can see and judge one another in with that myopic way. And that's the white man's way of looking at them, and to see that's the filter with which she looks at her own community. That was heartbreaking for me.
Yeah, I really highly recommend Sherman Alexie's films and his books. He is from Coeur d'Alene tribe. He's an awesome writer. He's had his movies made in Hollywood, I think Sundance. What's the film? Smoke Signals. Watch Smoke Signals. And Indian Killer is another one of his books. He really talks about the stereotyping that you're talking about. I've also had the same experience you're talking about, Jackie, with an African-American friend of ours who was met by heavy-duty racism in a environmental justice workshop she was part of. Jamin and I rescued her and stood behind her. When I spoke with the director of this Oregon-run environmental justice group, I thought I was talking to a white woman who was racist. She was not. She was African-American who had adopted the white system and was unwilling to address the racism, unwilling to ask for pardon for what happened to my African-American friend. So it's exactly what you're talking about. You know, it's we're all over the map, but we know what the right thing to do is. That's a good thing. Love you guys. I got to go back to the cooking for this guy. Keep him going.
Just for me.
Love you both.
She doesn't
Love
eat,
you
by
all.
the way.
This is women's. This is I call him peanut butter and jelly. This is PJ, and I call him.
Hi, cutie pie.
I call him Mr. Wonderful.
Mr. Wonderful. All right.
And this guy's eyes, they change. They'll be blue, green, gray. They just changed. I think they changed in turn depending on his mood. Yeah.
Oh, well, he's a cutie pie. How old are
Yeah,
you?
yes. He's just wonderful. He's looking for the remote.
How old is he?
8.
Oh my gosh, he's so cute as a baby. Hi, cutie.
Hey, I'm gonna have to go because I have to go pick up my grandson, and I really, Jackie, I never talked so much in my life. I'm kid you not, and I appreciate you for encouraging me and being a part of this here conversation. And thank you, Jamin. And we, you know, Jackie, you hit the nail on the head. How can we, given that this COVID thing is here, how can we get the community involved again? Maybe we can invite them here, you know, and let people from like Beverly from the streets, from the bottom speak about the solution that they see, and let them speak to their experience with oppression and racism, hearing it from, you know, people who've been affected by it the worst and the most.
Yeah, because this is the most non-violent venue I can imagine, seen from any angle, and that's what we need. We need a completely safe, peaceful, compassionate, loving, and totally non-violent venue. So
I just, oh, sorry, Jim. I thought you were going.
no, you're good. You're good, James. Go for it.
I'm James. Hey, James, brother, I got to take off right now. You know, it's always a pleasure being a part of the dialogue with you, but I have to take off for right now.
All right,
No
Melvin, PJ, brothers, you guys have a great evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Come back again. We'll be doing this all night long.
Cheers, Melvin. Thanks for that. Really enjoyed your talk here, man. And you're bang on the button. We need to get all these groups here and all talking, especially the people who are on the ground, who are on, as you said, like on the bottom tier, because these are the people that matter, and these are the people who need to come together now to, you know, because we're on our own.
All righty. Well, in 9 minutes, it'll be the top of the hour. What an amazing segment. Oh, my goodness. And Melvin, I'm just so honored that he says he's never talked so much in his life. I'm just honored to be here when he is talking. And Melissa says same here. Yeah.
I tell him all the time. We have these deep conversations all the time. I'm like, you need to be where people need to hear you.
Hey, Jackie's sister, I'm so sorry, but it's like your microphone went like muted or something. Something's up.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but still kind of faint. We can hear you, but faint.
That's weird. Anyway, I was just encouraging him to speak more. That he belongs speaking more.
Yeah, totally.
Great question.
Oh, and Melissa loves your questions, and yeah, I love your questions too. Just the way you see you draw it out of Melvin. The divine feminine is waking up the divine masculine, or whatever you call us.
Sacred masculine.
Sacred masculine. There we go. All righty. Well, it's 6:52. In 8 minutes, it'll be the top of the hour for Food Healers. Shall we take a break for a few? All righty. We'll see it. We'll see you at the top of the hour. Great work, Jackie. And James, Sarah, PJ, Melvin. Great to see you all. We'll take a little break for now. Drive safe. All right, we'll see you in a few minutes at the top of the hour. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.
So it's only going to be how many more minutes?
8 more minutes till the top of the
Okay,
hour.
I'm going to stay on and just put it on mute. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. I'm gonna do the same.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you in a few.